Hey friends, this is part 2 of my video on how to make a drawstring bag. Make sure you check out part 1 first. When you get to the end of your seam, don't forget to tie off. A lot of students do. So just a reminder, we're going in and out, making little stitches, putting our needle through the loop. Oops, I can't get the loop today. There. And pulling to make a little knot, and we're going to do that about 3 times. Make sure you get through both thread loops. Great. Okay, so you're going to trim that as close to your knot as possible without cutting the knot, without cutting your fabric. Great, so we're ready for the next step. What we need to do now is trim our seam allowance back a little. So we're going to be cutting along this edge. This is a good time to check your seam and make sure that you've done a straight running stitch all the way down. If you've accidentally done a whip stitch and you've got a little loop going across here somewhere, you're going to have to redo it, unfortunately. You can see my basics video to figure out how to solve your problem there. But if you've got any loops, you're going to have to redo it, because if you cut through it, your seam is going to fall apart. So what we're going to do now is cut our seam allowance in half. So we're just going to trim it back. Make sure that you don't cut your stitches, and then you'd have to resew. So that's one side. There, so that's done. What we're gonna do now is turn this inside out. Use your fingers to poke the corners out, make them nice and crisp. And if you have access to an iron and somebody who can show you how to use it, this is a good time to press. That's how we call ironing and sewing, press your fabric. If you don't, not the end of the world, you can do what we call a finger press. Make sure your seam's nice and flat right out, and then you can just sort of push down with your fingers. See, it's a little bit flatter on this side. Use the warmth of your hand and some pressure to push it down. Okay. What we're gonna do now is the exact same thing. We're gonna sew along here, and it's gonna trap all of our raw edges inside the seam. So put a couple pins in. Both sides, and then you can get ready to sew. So when you're sewing the second seam on this side here, you have to be very careful to do it in the right spot. Your seam allowance, again, is going to be about 1 finger width, 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch. The most important thing here is that you're sewing on this side, the inside of the raw edge of the fabric. So if you feel this, you should be able to feel where there's like a double layer of fabric. That's where the seam allowance from last time that we trimmed is. And we need to sew on the bottom of it so that it gets trapped in between both of our stitching lines. So I'm just going to finish off my little seam allowance, and I'll show you what this looks like. All right. So we're at the end of our seam. I just want to remind you to tie off and give you a little quick refresher on how to do that. So remember, you're doing about 3 little stitches in the same spot, and you're going to have your needle go through the loop to make a little knot. You do that 3 times or so. All right. I'm gonna trim my thread as close as I can without cutting anything important, put my needle back in the pin cushion, and take a look. So this is the side I just completed. I wanted to show you what happens to a lot of students. Many students will sew too close to the edge, and this causes problems. When you turn your project right side out, this is what happens. This side, the student sewed too close to the edge, and what do you see? You can see the raw edge poking through. We don't want that. This is the outside. We want it to look really nice. This side, I made sure that I was stitching just below where I could feel my fabric doubled up, and look at how beautiful it looks. So it's really nice and finished on the outside, but also on the inside. If you made this mistake and you need a reminder, go back to my basics of sewing video to see how you can fix your seam by taking it out real quick. All right, I'm gonna fix this up and show you the next part. All right, we're on to our next step. What we're going to do now is make what is called a casing for our drawstring. Basically, that's the little gap right here that we're gonna feed our drawstring through. So you'll notice that my drawstring comes out on the wrong side. The reason for that is that if I were to turn my fabric down this way, we would see the wrong side on the outside. I don't really like that. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna give your seams a little finger press, get them as flat as you can, use your iron if you have one. You're gonna fold your French seam over to the side, and then you're gonna flip down that top edge about 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter is our seam allowance. And you're gonna do that all the way around. Flip it down about 1 centimeter and pin it. When you get to your French seam, flatten it out, fold it down, okay, I've gone all the way around. Now we want to make sure that the inside of our bag looks really nice, so we're actually going to fold it over again so that we hide that raw edge. So take out one of your pins, fold it down the same amount, and pin it. Move along to your next pin, take it out, flip this down, and pin it. Flip this down and pin. And whoops, and we're gonna do our last one. We're gonna flip it down and pin it. Now, if you don't feel like everything is staying nicely with the pins you've done, you can add a couple more. There's no harm in adding a couple extra. I'm gonna add a few more, I guess. Just make sure it's super secure. So this is the little casing that our drawstring is gonna go through, but remember, we need a space where that's gonna go in and out. So there's gonna be part that we don't sew. What I always do is I add 2 pins to mark where I need to start and stop. So I want my opening to be right in the middle here. So I'm gonna move this one actually over to the side, and I'm gonna put 2 pins really close together. That shows me it's a start and stop point. I'm gonna go over about 2 centimeters or 1 inch, and I'm gonna do another double pin. So I'm not gonna sew here, but I'm gonna sew all the way around the rest of it. Because I'm right-handed, I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna sew this way. I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna sew all the way across. I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna sew to right here. So let's get started on that step. So I've gotten started sewing around my drawstring casing, and there are 2 main things I want you to notice here. I would like you to see how small and neat my stitches are. These need to be your best stitches on the whole bag because we're going to see them on the outside, especially if your thread doesn't quite match your fabric. The other thing I want you to notice is how close I am to the edge here. I'm maybe 1 millimeter away from the folded edge. That's about 1/8 of an inch. And you need to be really close because this is the space that your drawstring is going through. A lot of students make the mistake of sewing right in the middle and then they have no space for the drawstring to go through. So save yourself some time later and make sure that you're sewing really close to this edge and make really nice, beautiful little strong stitches. So I've sewn all the way around and I just wanted to show you my last couple stitches before I finish up at my double pins here. Now I'm getting pretty low on thread. This is about as low as you want to go. Don't feel like you have to make it all the way around in one go. You can always stop in the middle of a seam, tie off, and thread your needle anew. That's totally fine. All right, so we're gonna do 1 and 2. Oops, go through my loop. We're gonna do 1 more and then we're ready. Excellent. We are now ready for our last step. What you need now is a length of rope or string or elastic or anything you want to use for your drawstring. I didn't even measure this. I just sort of figure that's going to go around there and I want about that much extra. So what you want to do is tie a knot in one of the ends. So what I do is I just wrap it around my fingers and then I tuck this end here. You want to have a knot in there for a couple reasons. 1, you don't want whatever you're using to fray. And 2, you want to make sure that this doesn't fall into your casing and pull through, kind of like drawstrings do in your hood sometimes. So you have 2 options here for how to feed this through. You can use a safety pin or a bobby pin. I'll show you both. So this is how you use a safety pin. You're going to hold it by the sort of head and you squeeze it. And what's going to happen is one of the arms is going to push in and come out of that little groove and now it's open. You'll stick your safety pin through the knot gently without poking yourself and then you'll close it again. You squeeze it until the pointy end goes back into that groove. Next, what you do, we're going to go this way, is you put it in and what I do is I push the end of the safety pin against my thumb and I gather a whole bunch of fabric on it and then I just gently pull it through. Oh, it's giving me trouble today. So this is probably, honestly, the hardest part of making your bag. You need some patience for this one, so take your time, go slow. The edges where you've got your French seam are also always tricky, so be careful with that. And you're going to feed it all the way through until it comes out here. Now, if you can't find a safety pin or your safety pin is opened or you just don't love this, you don't need to use a safety pin. You can also use a bobby pin, a hairpin. All you have to do is put your string in here, pull it down, and basically that knot is going to stop it from coming out of your bobby pin. And you do the same thing. You feed it into your casing. I use my thumb to push up against the bottom of the bobby pin. And I gather the fabric up and then gently tug. And it's going to be a little tricky to get that knot through there, but that's okay. I'm going to pull it all the way through and around. And as I said, this is the part that students always have the most trouble with. Me too. So have some patience, understand that it's not going to go perfectly the first time, and that's okay. All right, now I've come through. I can poke my bobby pin out. There it is. And gently I'm going to pull. There. I can take this off now. And I'm going to tie a knot in this end. Do a little trim. And I am ready. I have a small drawstring bag.